Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Ollie, and today we're going to be running through purchase invoicing in Prima. If you've got any questions during or after the session, Mike will be on the live chat today, so please feel free to ask away. Okay, so let's get started then. So in terms of purchase invoicing, this is what we're going to be covering on screen today during the session. So an introduction to what purchase invoicing is, the EDI invoicing procedure and how it works, matching items on EDI invoices, non-EDI suppliers and the invoicing routine behind that in terms of actually creating the invoice for those types of suppliers, and the manual invoices, which we don't typically kind of recommend, but there is a facility to actually create manual invoices that don't link to any other kind of record in the system. Okay, so an introduction then to purchase invoicing. So I'll just switch over to my live screen, and I'll run through exactly kind of what purchase invoicing means to Prima. So effectively, what you have is the purchase order processing in your purchase order. So anything that goes through here will typically arrive into, or it'll arrive into your invoicing and purchase invoices area. So there's a link in between the two, and anything you put through as a purchase order will be available for purchase invoicing, whether that be electronic, which is the kind of the ideal scenario, or whether it's manual, where you can actually manage and create your own invoices through there as well. So purchase orders get put on the system, whether it's a stock order, whether it's linked through to a sales order, whatever it may be. And that then pushes through the system as a purchase invoice. Once you actually complete that record, that then posts over to your financial system, so you've got record of that as well for the likes of statements and things like that. Okay, so if we have a look at the purchase invoicing area then, if I just click into here, you can see this would be the area where your purchase invoices actually lie. So whether it's been created electronically, whether it's been created via the available lines, which I'll run through this in further detail. This is basically where all your purchase invoices are. So there's different kind of options in here. So you can see the note number, which is the Prima reference. You can see the account code, the supplier number. So all these kind of areas here will be populated, whether that's by yourself or whether it's electronic and through the link. So the key kind of point to note in here at the moment would be the status. So in the status, you have an outstanding status, which basically means this invoice is outstanding and needs to be completed. It's then also a completed status, which is kind of a transition between actually posting over to your financial system, and then posted means posted, so it's posted over to Sage, Xero or QuickBooks. So with the links with likes of Xero, Sage Cloud, QuickBooks, then typically when you complete an invoice, it'll post straight away, because you may not see the completed status. If you do a batch of invoices, it'll go into completed, and then the EDC will actually pick that up and do the transfer for you and then post it. So depending on the execution that's set on that. So that's a bit of background on purchase invoicing. If I just flick into my purchase order window which opened earlier, and in here it's basically a record of all the purchase orders that have been put through the system, and as I mentioned, these will then arrive into purchase invoicing, whether it's created electronically or manually via a user in Prima. So from here, a kind of a tip from an invoicing point of view, we've got a purchase order kind of webinar if you want to check through that as well in further detail. But from an invoicing point of view, you can see the status in here, starts, outstanding, awaiting receipt, and you've also got your invoiced one. So the ideal scenario would be all your purchase orders are invoiced if possible, and I guess that's a kind of a housekeeping routine that you can do monthly or weekly whenever you do your invoicing, to make sure that everything is going through the link as it should be and everything is getting invoiced as well. Okay, so that's a background on purchase invoicing. In terms of actually who you can do your purchase orders, purchase invoicing with, depends on your company setup, so whether they're a supplier or not. So just an example, I'll just use Exertis. So when you create your company record, or you've already got it created in your system, in your main tab here, you just need to make sure it's ticked as a supplier to be able to do a purchase order through to purchase invoice with them. And then in your supplier tab over here, you've got some extra kind of options as well from an invoicing point of view and also from an EDI point of view as well. So this is the area which I'll cover shortly as well, which you can go in and set up EDI. You can set up automated invoicing, which I'll cover that shortly as well for direct deliveries, that is. Okay, so moving on to the next one then. So the next stage of the webinar would be the EDI invoicing procedure and exactly how that works. So if I just click onto the next screen, which is the EDI purchase invoices. So this is basically a step-by-step kind of platform of exactly how Prima collects your invoice and posts it through to your financial system. So effectively the first point would be your supplier uploads an invoice to an FTP site with your EDI details. So as you've seen on screen a second ago, in that kind of Exertis supplier area, those are the details that the supplier would provide to you. So this is arranged and agreed with you and your supplier. You populate then your EDI details, and according to that, your Prima EDC will then collect the invoice or credit and imports it into Prima Cloud based on what's set in your admin, which again, I'll cover this shortly. So basically, details that your supplier will give to you, you put in Prima, and then your EDC actually automatically goes and collects those jobs for you, depending on what you set up in terms of whether it's every 15 minutes, whether it's every hour, whether it's once a day. You can basically manipulate that per supplier as well. Okay, the next point, Prima will then attempt to match the EDI purchase order based on various factors such as the code, price, and more. So I'll come on to that later on in the session as well, but there's a matching process that actually occurs to make sure that you're not being overcharged, or they're not invoicing you for the wrong codes, or duplicate invoices going through. So there is a matching process, which we do have an image on our kind of Prima Help social media, whether that's Twitter or the Facebook community group, where you can actually keep a copy of that image if you wanted it just as reference. So when we first train kind of new clients or new users to Prima on purchase invoicing, we tend to advise to have that close to you, so then when you're going through your invoicing and matching, you can actually say, oh yeah, this one's probably because the price is wrong, this one's probably because the description's wrong, those kind of things, which I'll come on to as well. And then the final point, if it does match, happy days, Prima will automatically complete, and then as a result it'll transfer straight through to your financial system. So as long as your purchase order is correct, you've sent it through electronically, the code, the price, everything is hunky-dory, that'll then come into Prima. The system will go, yep, that's for that purchase order, yep, that's the right stuff, match it all automatically, and that then would automatically complete as well. So effectively, once you've sent your purchase order, you don't need to do any more, and it'll be showing in your financial system for payment. Okay, so if it doesn't match, that's then when you're left with the kind of the admin task of your outstanding invoice record. So coming back to when I was looking at the status area of the purchase invoicing, you can actually see what's outstanding. Has it come through electronically? Yes, it has. How can we make sure this matches and go through that as well? So it could be things such as kind of delivery charges the suppliers uploaded. It wasn't on your system, but you just need to make sure that it is moving forward. There's various factors which we'll cover as well. Okay, so if we start with the first point then, the FTP site and your EDI details. If I just flip back onto the screen just to reiterate where that would be, is basically if I go to there. Okay, so within your company record, so whether you go into Exertis, Vow, Spices, Trade Supply, whoever it may be, within the company record, and then the supplier tab here, these are where you're putting your details. So making sure your EDI details are set up in here is the kind of the key starting point. Once you've actually set up those details, you can then decide, yep, this is great for EDI ordering, but from an invoicing point of view, I now need to tell the system when I want to collect it and how. So basically, when you log into the administration, so when you open your Prima Cloud login box and select the administration application, then when you come into here, you go into EDC, which I've already got preloaded there, and these are basically a list of jobs the EDC does for you. The one that we need to look at today is the receive and process of electronic invoices and credits. So what you can do, you can see this is disabled on this test database, but that would be enabled, and you can double click into it, and that'll then give you a list of all the EDI suppliers and the kind of the timed execution of when your system will pick up those invoices. So if we were doing, let's say, Antalis, then what you can actually do is say, yeah, Monday through to Sunday, tick them all if you wanted to. A timed execution of between 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, for example, every 15 minutes, and save that. The system then on a loop every 15 minutes between that time on those days will then kind of connect to your supplier's FTP site. Is there any invoices? Yeah, we'll take them, pull them through, and then import them automatically into Prima. So this is the area where you make sure that all your suppliers that you deal with and you do EDI invoicing with can pull through and provide that automatic feature for you. Okay, so we can close out of there. Another thing that you can do is from system keys and tolerance system keys is actually set a few tolerances in here as well. So invoicing tolerance in pence is default to 10p, so if there's 10p difference, then it'll automatically match for you and kind of say, yeah, that's fine, it's 10p. You can change that to 1p to £1, whatever you want it to do, you can update that. And also complete purchase invoices if only the unmatched line is for delivery charges. So if your supplier is constantly doing different delivery charges on the invoices, you can actually say to your system, yeah, that's fine, we'll just accept them come through, so we don't have to do the admin of actually completing it. You can disable that and obviously monitor those kind of on a case-by-case basis and run through that. So on the delivery charges point of view, and actually allowing your kind of invoices to match, so if they've created a new one as an example, and you need to add that to your exceptions list, then within your general area, there's a section for purchase delivery codes, And within here, as you can see, kind of the vow typical repeat one is a popular one. You can come into here and actually create a new delivery code. So these that are in here now in our test database are basically a list of exceptions for delivery charges through the invoicing. So when I receive an invoice for 10 items that have gone through my Prima system, and it's got a delivery charge of rapid on it, rather than the system going, oh no, you can't complete that automatically because this delivery charge is on there, we don't recognise it, this is the exception area where you can set it up and basically stop your system from preventing the invoice going through automatically. Okay. Okay, so the next one, Prima will attempt to match the EDI purchase orders based on various factors. Yeah, so actually the matching process now. So from this point of view, when your invoice actually drops into Prima, it has the invoice lines on there, there's an area where you can actually see if it's matched or not. So I've got a screenshot that I can show you now on here. It's quite small on your screen, I appreciate that, so I'll go through it in more detail on screen too. But on your left hand side there, you can see an option to actually match an item. So if I kind of, I can't hover over that actually, but just to the right of the supplier code, there's a match item box. It's kind of not greyed out. So central on the screen, you can actually say, yep, this hasn't matched to anything. I need to hit match item, and that'll then give me the pop-up you can see of all the available items that I can match to. So as long as there's something in the system for it to match to, such as a purchase order that's gone through electronically, you can then say, oh yeah, that's right, it's just the wrong price on this occasion, and I'll match that to the invoice. That then marks your invoice, or your order as invoice, sorry, and allows you then to push through that purchase invoice and basically does the matching process. The right hand side would be if it is, say, like I think that one's a marketing charge that this customer's been charged, or maybe a catalogue or a delivery charge that's come through, and there's not actually anything for it to match to, that's fine, you can complete that invoice through the system. So if it is an item you've actually put through Prima and you've ordered, you do need to match it to make sure that your system knows that the order is actually invoiced, so you're not duplicating stuff and there's not kind of a backlog of invoice lines that need to be kind of monitored and a housekeeping routine to remove them off. So typically, if the invoices aren't being matched to, in your available lines area, you will have a load of kind of purchase order lines that the system doesn't think is invoiced, but it actually has been because the supplier's invoiced you, but you've not matched it. So that's, I guess, from that point of view. So I'll go through the reasons for it not to match shortly. If I just switch on to the live screen, if I just close out of these areas, and back into the purchase invoice lookup. So if I went into this top invoice here as an example, and I go into the lines tab, within here you can see the status column. So if there's a status of XXX in there, basically Prima hasn't been able to match to a purchase order in the system because of various reasons, which I'll cover shortly. So in here you've then got this option for match item. So when you go into there, you can hit match item, which on this test database is going to be loads of kind of duff data. But basically you would have then a list of item codes, which typically you're looking for the same item code unless your system's showing different to the suppliers. You can then see the description, quantity, pack size, cost price, your purchase order number, your receipt note number. So from here, it may be the case that you've got 5 items to choose from. The cost price is £2. The order, 5 different orders on here, and you know for a fact, yeah, this one relates to purchase order number 123. I can match the item, which then, if I did click match item, then this status column would then be kind of blank as such, and there's no more options to match. And you can then process that invoice through, and that basically collects the item from your purchase order available lines as such. So what I mean by the available lines as well is when you're in your purchase invoice lookup here, over on the right hand side, available lines is anything that's been put through on a purchase order. So when I'm actually matching that purchase invoice to an order, that's pulling through from this area into the invoice. If I didn't do that, it's just going to wait in available lines until the day that I do. So that'll be coming into the case of, which I'll run on to shortly, as well as the manual invoicing of the suppliers that don't do EDI. That's the area that you go to actually create the invoice. So if I went into available lines and looked as values in this example, then anything in there is something that's not yet been electronically invoiced. So it could be a case that there's an old purchase order in there from 2012 as an example, that's not been matched up in the system, and it may be the case that you've done it manually just through error, and you can, I guess, create that and cancel it off to correct your system. So available lines is the area where all the purchase orders go, and then when it's automatically matching, it'll pull those items from there and complete the invoice. Is the idea behind it. Okay, just flicking back onto that screen. Okay, so as you can see, if it matches, Prima then automatically completes and transfers through to the financial system. When it doesn't automatically complete, that's when it's outstanding, and that's then when you need to do your matching process. So for the reasons not for it to match to a purchase order in your system, I'll just flick onto that screen now, and you can see then on screen now all the reasons for electronic invoices not completing automatically. So if there's no purchase order in your system, so if you phoned it through or emailed it through and forgot to put it through Prima, that would be a reason why the purchase order has not been able to match to the electronic invoice that's pulled through. List of reasons here as well. So product code doesn't match on the invoice to what's on the order. Quantities or pack sizes don't match. So if you put through a purchase order for 5 and they've invoiced you for 10, the system's basically stopping you from being invoiced too much. Prices outside of the tolerance, which we went through that in the administration area, of basically where you can say 10p tolerance, 5p tolerance to make sure that you're not being overcharged or whatever it may be. Invoice lines already matched to another purchase order. So if you were going through the matching process and actually matched that purchase invoice to the wrong purchase order, then the next invoice that comes through for that order wouldn't be able to match automatically for obvious reasons. EDI invoice will only match to an electronic purchase order. So if you were emailing through a purchase order or phoning it through, then the system can't match to an order that isn't electronic. So it looks for the electronic link in the system. Supplier reference doesn't match. That could be another reason. And also purchase order stuck as awaiting acknowledgement, and it needs to be clicked to progress to receipt in the purchase order. So in your purchase order area, when you send it through electronically, kind of the stages are it goes through to a pending status, then when it's actually sent through to the supplier, it's awaiting acknowledgement, and then once your supplier's acknowledged it and put their file on, it comes back into Prima and says, yeah, this has been accepted, these are on back orders, these aren't, and that process. So if for whatever reason there is an error in the link, so whether that's a supplier's end or you've disabled your EDC or anything like that, then that could be a reason why it's stuck as awaiting acknowledgement. So that's a rare case really, but what you would need to do is go into the purchase order, view that purchase order where it's saying awaiting acknowledgement, and there's a little button at the top right where you can progress it through to receipt and just basically force that order through the system. Okay. So just to recap then on the EDI invoice process. So supplier uploads the invoice to the FTP site, your EDI details collects the invoice via the EDC and then puts it into Prima automatically. It'll then attempt to match on all those reasons I've just listed then on the previous screen, and if it matches, automatically completes, and as a result it'll then transfer through to your financial system, whether that's Xero, QuickBooks or Sage. Okay, so going back to the intro screen then. So we've run through so far the intro to purchase invoicing, EDI invoicing, and match items on EDI invoices. So the next step now is to run through the non-EDI suppliers and the invoicing routine for those. So if you're purchasing through Amazon, Asda, whatever it may be, any kind of manual supplier that you have in your system, then you can actually invoice through Prima through that available line section that I was running through a moment ago. So if I switch back onto the live screen, so in your purchase invoicing area here, you've got this available lines on the right hand side. So if I click into there, and if I was to run a search, that would then pull through every single purchase order that's gone through. So it could include EDI suppliers that just haven't yet automatically invoiced or hasn't yet been matched to an invoice. And when I search in here now, you would then have a list of the suppliers that you put purchase orders through the system for. So you can see Spices, Val, West Coast. If I sort by company name, you can then see the likes of the Advent, Antalis, Beta, and then these ones here that are kind of non-EDI suppliers. So on your system, you'll have different suppliers to what I've got here. So as an example, we've got Kelly's Test supplier here in the system. You can see a type ID, which is the actual purchase order number, and you can see some basic info such as the lines, the net, the VAT, and the gross on it as well. So depending on how you're wanting to invoice, if I was doing an invoice for Kelly's Web Store, let's pretend this is a supplier, and I was wanting to do an invoice for them, so I can come into this area, use my control key on my keyboard and select the invoices that I'm wanting to generate, or you can drag and drop to do that. Other kind of features you can do is search on the actual supplier. So if I search for Kelly in here and run a search, every supplier with Kelly in the name would then appear as what's to be available to invoiced. You can search on product code, purchase order number, rather than kind of scrolling through these available lines. Other options you do have, so you can consolidate it by purchase order. So you can see on the screen, this is an invoice per order. I can consolidate it, so I can do them all at once if I wanted to, depending on whether it's direct or a stock order. I can do it by receipt note, and I can make sure it's been receipted in only. So there's a few different options you can do. So typically you're going to be looking at by purchase order, by supplier, and it may be the case that you're not just doing Kelly's, you're doing all these different suppliers that are in the grid. So if I was doing, say, Kelly's Web Store, and I was doing Gresham Test, and I was doing Euro Wholesaler, I can highlight the lines that I'm wanting to create, and then from that stage then, this is actually in the purchase order available lines stage, and when I hit this all lines button, that then generates a record in this grid here. So I'll have purchase invoice number 281, 282, 283 as an example there. So if I just do the one example, I'll highlight that, hit all lines, and that would then generate the purchase invoice from there. So the difference in why there is all lines and no lines, all lines would pull through every single line of that purchase order onto the invoice. If I selected no lines, it would basically create a blank invoice. And the reason why you can create a blank invoice is because you can actually pull through from additional items tab over here. If I just click into there, and that basically looks back into this purchase invoice available line. So this is now listing every single purchase order for Kelly in there, and by the items that are available to invoice. So instead of invoicing just order number 21918, I can actually say, in fact, let's just do them in bulk, because I've got a bulk invoice from my supplier, and you can do it that way. So you can basically add selected items, and that then would build the invoice further. Okay, but aside from that, once you've actually hit all lines, this then generates your invoice. So from here you can say, yep, my invoice number is 123, my reference is this, the invoice date is going to be today, or you can backdate it or forward date it. And then on your right hand side you've got some kind of calculations to make sure that what your supplier's invoiced you is matching with what you've got. So if I say, yep, that's great, it's 667.54, I can hit save, or I can click away from this kind of red area here to save, and that then updates. I can then calculate the VAT. So if I hit the VAT breakdown there, and I say, yep, standard rate, that's the one I want, save that and close the form, and then basically this invoice is then ready to go. Permitting that you don't need to go into your lines and make sure that everything's correct from this point of view, or you don't need to change any prices. Then from there, then you can hit complete, and then depending on your financial system, it'll either go into a completed or posted status, and that's then the process done for it. So as you can see here, I've only done the one invoice from available lines, but you can do invoices in bulk. So if I went into available lines, highlighted 50 purchase orders, and hit all lines, I would then have 50 purchase invoices in the grid. And then from here, then I can use my arrows to flick between the next invoice and run through them in kind of a more efficient manner. So rather than going available lines, create invoice, go through, complete, available lines, process, complete, I can actually create them all in a bulk, go through each invoice, use the arrows to flick through, calculate my net, my VAT, put in my invoice numbers that I've probably got in front of me on a printout or on email, hit complete, and that's then the purchase invoice complete from a manual perspective. So you can kind of see from just running through the manual invoicing how much of an efficiency kind of gain EDI invoicing is, because technically when you send through your purchase order, as long as your system's kept up to date and everything's correct, then purchase invoicing doesn't need to be dealt with until it's in your financial system. So that's quite a powerful kind of tool in Prima. One thing as well that I mentioned earlier was actually automatic kind of invoicing. And what I meant by invoicing kind of an automatic point of view, EDI is automatic of course, but from a direct delivery point of view, what you can actually do is when you send through your purchase order, direct delivery to your supplier, you then have a receipt note and a dispatch note that are outstanding, and the system is waiting for someone to go in and complete them and say, yeah, that's been done. From a direct delivery point of view, when the supplier invoices you, whether it's electronically or whether you do it manually via like the Amazons, the Asdas, whatever it may be that you're buying from, then you can actually, when you generate the invoice and complete it, or whether it's automatically created, then what it can actually do is backtrack in the system, invoice completes, and it then looks for the receipt note, dispatch note, and completes those for you as well. So from that point of view, if I just click into this company link here to go back into this supplier and into the supplier tab, there's an option here for auto complete direct delivery on invoice. So as soon as you actually do a purchase invoice, rather than managing your movements area and your purchase invoice area, when you do your purchase invoice, it backtrack in the system and complete the receipt and dispatch note for you if it's not already been done. So that's a relatively new feature to the back end of kind of last year, and there is a webinar on that as well if you're wanting to look into that in further detail. Okay. Any questions, of course, as well, if you email myself or training@primasoftware.co.uk, and we can obviously go through anything in more detail we're running through here today. Okay. Another tip which I forgot to mention during the session is across the top here you've got this coloured bar in all areas of the system, and what you can do is if you generated all of your manual invoices from here and you've got all your electronic invoices in the grid, to actually differentiate between the two, if you extend your search option here you can actually select a type as well. So you can say, let's just have a look at the electronic ones that I need to match up, and let's just have a look at the manual ones. So you can actually filter those out as well. You can search on a supplier number. So if, as an example, going back to Vow, they upload an invoice and they'll give you a supplier number and they've sent it on email, you can check in your system to make sure that's actually in there. Has it completed? Yes, no. You can, and from there then go through the stages. You can search on other things, which are product code, supplier account code, of course, invoice date, completion date, and things like that as well. And another tip you can do is actually look at either the header, so the invoice header, or you can look at lines, which if I search here, it's only going to pull through everything greater than 281, and you can see then the actual item codes on the purchase invoices as well. And if you really wanted to, you can right click and export the data into Excel. Okay. Another thing that you can do from purchase invoicing, so rather than going through completing, you can highlight them in a batch, hit complete, give them an invoice date stamp, and that can then complete them all in a batch as well. So a few different ways in which you can do invoicing from a manual perspective and also from EDI perspective. So EDI ones typically you'd be going in and matching them anyway if needs be, if there's the kind of the odd cases that come through. But otherwise, your manual invoices, you can highlight them in bulk and complete them. So there's kind of efficiency kind of areas that you can look at from that point of view of just doing them in a bulk rather than individually doing those as well. Okay. So if I flick back onto the intro screen, so the last area to cover on today's webinar is actually manual invoices. So generating a manual invoice that's not linked to a purchase order and just putting that onto your system for whatever reason. So if I go into the main screen, so what you can do from anywhere in Prima, you can hit new record and go to purchase invoice. And similar to how you create a purchase order, a sales order, you would then populate with your account code or company name, or your multi-search, which is based on a postcode or some sort of location. So if I search for WA80RP, it then pull through Prima, just as an example. So if I'll use Vow as another example again, and I'm creating an invoice for this account here. I can put a reference in if I want to, location, contacts, etc., and hit create. Otherwise, you can update that once you've actually created it. So as you can see, similar to the manual invoice from available lines, you've then got all these options to fill in. So if I just put in the invoice number again, 1234, my reference is this, the date is going to be today, and so on. So putting all this information in, you can do first, or you can go into your lines and add your lines first and then do this. So from the lines tab here, what I can do is create a new record and then add on the information. So if I said, right, it's going to be KF24001, my description is this, so it is a very manual process to do it. So typically, I've seen some customers doing it for gas charges, water charges, those kind of things, which you can do it, and it is an option. So if you put in the information into here, so there's my information, quantity of 1, price is £1, I can update whether it's a pack of each, pack of 100, whether it's VAT, whether it's exempt, what nominal it belongs to, so is it a delivery charge that I'm doing, and the Department of Office. Save that onto to the invoice, and you will have the option to match it because the system's trying to get you to match to a purchase order because it's not linked to anything in the system. And if you wanted to, you hit complete once you've done your calculations of the net and the VAT, and that then is a manual purchase invoice in the system. So there's not a great need to do it. If you have got a kind of a case of where you would need to do it, run it through, I guess, our customer services team first, because it may be the case that you probably need to put on a purchase order for stock or something to make sure that your stock's going into the system as well as being invoiced for stuff as well to make sure everything's correct. Okay. So just to recap what we've run through in the session then. So we've run through intro to purchase invoicing, what that means to Prima, EDI invoicing, the procedure and how it works, matching items on EDI invoices, and a list of reasons why. So again, if you do need that image, just contact us and we can send that across to you, or look on our social media. Non-EDI suppliers and the invoicing routine for those, so going through the available lines section for those, and the manual invoices via the new record if that is an option that you're wanting to do in the system. Okay, so that's everything for today. If you do have any questions, myself and Mike will be hanging around on the live chat for a short while after. Otherwise, you can contact training@primasoftware.co.uk if you're wanting to book in training or ask any kind of quick questions that we can happily help you with. Okay, well, thank you for your time and hope you all have a great weekend.